Man, I was running through the streets of Houston thinking people were chasing after me. I got tased by the police. I was hearing voices. And it's when I cried out to God that Jesus made himself real. And he took something that I couldn't kick for 17 years, and he took that away in a moment. And he just began to deal with me that he had a plan for my life. And as I walked with him and learned who he was, that he just began to make himself more and more real to me. And that's exactly what he wants to do for you.
You will live and not die and declare the mighty works of the Lord. Welcome to Set Free Podcast. I'm Abel, and Ryan, he's not sitting at my right today. He's not on my side, but we're actually doing Ryan's story today. Those who know Ryan, he's been a very inspiration to many, and I'm just excited to see what God is going to do today. For those who don't know, we'll just let Ryan introduce himself.
Yeah, what's up, Abel? My name's Ryan Orban. I'm 46 years old, husband to Rebecca, got 4 beautiful daughters. Been married about 10 years, been serving the Lord for about 12 years in the community of Brookshire, first with an organization called Eyes on Me, and for the past year and a half with a place called the Manna House, which is a men's recovery home. Our goal is to see men become set free, set apart, and set on fire for the kingdom of God.
Amen, amen. So me and Ryan usually co-host, and we tell people's story. I always say when people ask me about the podcast is not about us. It's about the stories of what God can do. And we like to invite people on and to share their story. But Ryan, he's come on today, and we're going to hear a bit of his story. And I'm excited to hear what God has done in his life. Man, it always reminds me of the scripture. It says that he that is forgiven much is grateful much. And a lot of times you see men of God that are used mightily, and a lot of times there's a story behind it. So today we're going to dig into Ryan's story, and I just want to jump right into it. Let's go. Tell us where you grew up, your childhood, and
Yeah. So I was born in Bossier City, Louisiana. My mom and dad were living there. Both my parents are from Iowa. They got divorced when I was 1 year old, and my mom moved to Houston. So I've been in Houston pretty much ever since. I grew up on the southwest side. SWAT, the A-Leaf.
Southwest?
Yes, SWAT. I was in A-Leaf, and then Mo City was where I went to high school. So I grew up in A-Leaf and then Mo City.
Yeah. So what was it like growing up? You had siblings?
So
sisters?
Again, my mom and dad got divorced when I was 1. My mom moved to Houston. My dad followed not too far after. He moved to Houston for work. He ended up getting remarried. And my mom remarried when I was 3 years old. So she married my stepdad. My stepdad was young, 23 years old, raised me, great man. I ended up having 2, a brother and a sister that were younger than me, 6 years and 9 years younger than me. And I had a pretty stable home life for the most part. Mom was awesome. My stepdad and I butted heads a lot. My dad, he was around a little bit when I was younger, but we started separating. He started having issues with my mom, child support, things like that. He was kind of raising somebody else's kids and not mine, not me. And so that began like creating that wound of like not having a father in my life. And I think my stepdad caught the heat mostly for that because him and I butted heads a lot. We're very stubborn. And I was a good kid for the most part, real smart, real intelligent kid. I did get messed with by a girl in my daycare when I was real young. I didn't realize that opened the door to some sexual immorality until much later in life. But that was, one thing that happened to me when I was young that was traumatic. My dad not being there, that girl messing with me. And other than that, I was just kind of a rambunctious kid. Real smart, real good in school, made real great grades, but got in a lot of trouble just because I was bored. So I was always disrupting class, things like that. Very immature for my age. Always the smartest one in the class, but the most immature as well.
Yeah.
So that got me in a lot of trouble. My mouth got me in a lot of trouble with my dad. My stepdad. I would argue and just thought I was always right all the time. Yeah. And but didn't get in a whole lot of trouble. Always had sports to kind of keep me from going left.
What kind of sports you play?
Well, when I was younger, I played soccer. I liked that a lot. You know, back then on the streets, whatever season it was is what we played. Around, you know, we had kids on the street would always playing basketball, baseball, football, but football was the thing that I liked the most, you know. So I come from a family that played a lot of college and pro ball. I had I think 7 uncles and cousins that all played.
Everybody was kind of tall.
Yeah, for sure.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'3". 6'3", and yeah, seven of my cousins and uncles played professional football or played in college, all from the University of Iowa. Oh, okay. And so I always kind of wanted to be like them, you know. But so football was my main sport. I really loved it. I always bought into team really well. Yeah. And that kept me out of trouble, you know, through school most of the time.
Yeah, it usually does. So what was your relationship with God during this time? Did y'all attend church? Were you acquainted?
Yeah, so I had my stepdad's mother. You know, we called her Nana. She was amazing. She was really the backbone of my family spiritually. My stepdad and mom didn't attend church much. My stepdad will tell you today that his biggest regret that he didn't have us in the church like he was raised in the church. And I think he beats himself up a little bit for that today. But we always believed in God. Jesus, the story Jesus always rang true with me. My grandma was the one that would make sure we were at church on the big holidays, you know, Christmas, Easter, Mother's Day, you know. But we were classic back row Baptists. We'd like sit in the back row, sneak in late. Yeah. She would be the one that would have to point us out every time in church, brag on us being there. And but she would make us memorize the 23rd Psalm, the Lord's Prayer, and she was the one that would teach us songs about Zacchaeus, songs about the foolish man who built his house upon the sand. Like, she was the one that was putting that in myself, my siblings, and my cousins.
Yeah. So what was high school like? You were playing sports?
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting in trouble? Any drug use?
Yeah, so I moved out to Missouri City like right for junior high. And the first year or two, I got in a lot of fights at school, just kind of the new kid in the new area. But once sports started my 7th grade year, a lot of that just kind of went away. You know, like I said, I bought into team. I was always a smaller kid. You know, once puberty hit, like everybody kind of passed me by. So
you were a late bloomer.
Late bloomer. That's the same words my mama used to wear. She used to tell me that too, because I told you my cousins and my uncles, they all played college and pro ball. You know, I had an uncle that was in 4 Super Bowls. I had a cousin that was a 5-time All-Pro, and she would always say, hey, our family's always been late bloomers, you know? And so she was like, don't worry about it. Like, she goes, don't worry about it. Like, they all played college ball, you know? And I didn't quite believe her. So, you know, I played football, played a lot in middle school. So freshman and sophomore year, didn't play very much because everybody kind of passed me by size-wise. Then I think before my junior year, I started to grow a little bit. So I went from like 5'7" to 5'11", and just a hair about 6 foot my senior year. So my junior year, I played a lot more. My senior year, I played quite a bit, and I moved positions. I played tight end. You know, back then they didn't have all these spread offenses where they're throwing the ball around that much. We ran an offense, had 3 running backs, so we ran the ball most of the time. Yeah. But I did okay. You know, I did okay. I didn't party a whole lot. I didn't drink at all, except for a couple times. I think I got drunk for the first time when I was 13. Knew something was different about it right away. I knew I wanted to feel that way all the time. But, like, again, football, I just kind of kept my mind focused on that. Okay. And my senior year, I started kind of smoking a little bit. And then when football ended my senior year, I started drinking a lot more. Okay. And
you graduated?
I did. I graduated high school, and I went to Texas A&M for a year. And I think if I look back on my life where I could make – there was like a crossroads where I could have made a better choice is I was so in a hurry. You know, I had a great mom, stepdad, but they were very strict, you know. They were very strict. They always wanted me to live up to my potential. Not overbearing, but just would hold me accountable. And I really didn't want to be held accountable. You know, I always made good grades, but I could have made straight A's if I would have put in a little effort, you know.
Sleeping in class.
Absolutely, and just goofing off or whatever. And so there was a small school in Oklahoma that was starting a football program, and they wanted me to come play for them. And I said, nah, I don't want to go. I had a scholarship to A&M. And I was just ready to go get out from under my parents' house, and I was ready to book.
So you lived on campus?
I had A&M. Yeah, I did.
What was that like?
Man, I said, you know, I partied so hard, they asked me not to come back after 2 semesters, you know? Like, I lived right across the street from Northgate. I was at the Dixie Chicken all the time. When I found out you didn't have to go to class, the only time I showed up for class was on test days, thinking I could just do what I did in high school and make good grades without even being there, you know? And I didn't. I did pretty bad. And I came home after the first semester, had a 1.3 GPA, and my stepdad, he had paid for me to go to college, you know, except for I had a partial scholarship. And he goes, hey, look, dude, you went up there and screwed it up. He goes, I had a little money saved up. He goes, if you want to go back the second semester, he goes, I'm not paying for it. You're going to have to pay for it yourself. And he goes, and if you get above, 3.0 was a standard from him from Jump Street always. I got in trouble if I got C's ever, you know. Yeah. He goes, if you go up there and get above a 3.0, I'll start paying again. He goes, but if you don't, he goes, I'll never pay another dime for your college ever again, you know. Yeah. And I said, okay. And I went and I paid on my own dime, and I just did the same thing again. I just partied. And mostly drinking, a lot, quite a bit of smoking weed, but mostly drinking at that point. Okay. And I came home after my spring semester, and my mom, who had really cut for me to go away to school. See, my stepdad knew I didn't have the maturity level to handle it, you know, but she kind of always got her way with my stepdad, you know, and she really fought for me to go, and it really hurt her when I went up there and just screwed it up, you know. And so I came home. I was working 2 jobs, and I had got a taste of not living by rules, so I didn't want to live by their rules. I started coming home when I wanted to, and I remember I was at my best friend's house one night after work. I just got off work. It was about 1 a.m, and I was going to stay the night over there, and my stepdad said it was cool, but my mom had already said, like, it wasn't, and she was already highly pissed at me. And so she gave me a call over there, and she told me to get my butt home. And I came home, and, like, as soon as I pulled up in the driveway, like, my stuff is coming out the front door, like, coming down the steps, out in the front lawn, like, in the suburbs, you know, like, making a big scene. And my stepdad will tell you to this day, he goes, man, I didn't know if she was throwing my stuff out or his, you know. And again, it was another one of those crossroads in life. My stepdad looked at me and he goes, Ryan, like, it doesn't have to be like this. He goes, you're wanting to choose the school of hard knocks. That's what he called it, you know. And he goes, and I said, I hardened my heart, and I said, yeah, it's got to be like this. And I took my stuff and I left, you know. And
where'd you go from there?
I went back to my best friend's house. My best friend, Bobby Dean, been my best friend for almost 40 years now, not quite 35 years now. And I went and stayed with him, but, I'm 19, 20 years old at that point, 19 years old. And, there's only so long you can couch surf, on your homie's house with his parents or whatever, and they loved me like their own kid, but they weren't going to put up with all that. So I stayed with him a couple months and moved in with some other friends, saved a little money, was working at the grocery store, and took another job with a company, and ended up getting my own apartment. And I was still partying hard, drinking a lot. And I went over to one of my friend's apartments one day, and I walked in, and as soon as I walked in, there was a girl walking around with no shirt on. As soon as I walked in there, I was like, man, this is where I want to be. And everybody was over there hanging out, and I just started hanging out over there, and we went out that night, and we went to a place it was late, we were drinking at the house, and it was like 2 a.m, and I go, let's go to this after hours club. So we went to the after hours, and it's called Gotham City. It was like Richmond and Fountain View, and I ended up taking ecstasy for the first time that night. And as soon as I took it, like for like 45 minutes, I didn't feel nothing, and then 45 minutes into it, it was like everything felt good. It was the best feeling I ever felt. And I was like, man, I always want to be like this. And that kind of sent me on the roller coaster for the ecstasy, and like was my entryway into the street.
Did your drug use progress to harder drugs, or did you kind of just stay at ecstasy and smoking weed and drinking?
Yeah, so no, it progressed really fast. Actually, I I started partying every weekend, taking X every Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And this was...
Were you selling, or it was just...
No. Just taking it, partying all the time. I had a pretty decent job at the time. I was working for, like, it was kind of like an insurance company. And I worked in their accounting department. So I was making pretty good money. And so I was partying all the time, taking ecstasy all the time. And this is about 2000. And if you remember, I don't know if anybody was out there, I started going to a lot of raves and like clubs.
You remember Y2K? You said 2000.
Oh yeah. Not Y2K, but there was a big rave called Transit.
Okay.
And Transit had an undercover, Channel 2 News was there, and they had an undercover thing, and they showed all the kids like all X'd out on the floor and everything. And
were you one of the kids on the floor?
No, I actually didn't go that night. I gave my ticket away. Oh, okay. But it kind of pulled back the curtain on the whole rave scene in Houston. Yeah, and man, there started to be a lot of heat for ecstasy, right? And so my friend at his apartment, the guy we were getting the X from, him and I became really tight, right? Well, after this news story came out that ecstasy kind of dried up, and there was this one dude, he was from Taiwan, and he was friends with kind of all of us, and he was like, "Nah, look, like my buddy, his name's Corey. He was starting to sell, to all his friends, right? Well, the X dried up, and this guy, this Asian dude, was kind of like, hey, like, let me put you on this other stuff. We're getting it fresh off the boat from Taiwan, and it was ice, LA Glass, right? And I'd never done meth before. I'd never even seen it, and I was like, man, I don't want to do that, And my buddy started selling it, and he went really from quickly peddling just a little bit to do his for free to moving like quarter pounds, quarter keys every week really fast. And it didn't take long for me to jump in on it, like as far as using, And I said no for a little bit, but man, I couldn't find the X anymore. And I was like, man, this will kind of be like that. And that kind of sent me on the path.
How did it start off? Were you popping it?
Yeah, I snorted it first mostly. Snorted it for a long time, and I would gut bomb it some.
Man, that thing burns.
Yeah, dude. And back then, we thought like only crackheads smoked it, weird ways you justifying it. But eventually I smoked it, and never shot it, was always scared of needles. I don't think I would have ever came back. But in like a short period of time, I dropped like 40 pounds, got super skinny, and I lost my job. And my buddy, he moved in with me that was selling all the dope. And, went from just us going to the parties, having fun, was to now there's like guns, all this trafficking coming on, like all this stuff coming through. And it was like in a real short period of time, it was like I was in a movie, I was like, man, I'm just a kid from the suburbs, really. And how did I get wrapped up in this? But, drug had its hooks in me, so it didn't really matter at that point.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy like how, it starts off, small, fun, and then it just basically consumes your life, and next thing you know, you're living for the drug and selling, and it can kind of take you for a rabbit trail,
it happened so fast, man. It happened so fast, before I could even like realize I was in a spin, and by then you're like caught in the cycle, you're caught in the trap. And I guess one thing that kept me out of it was like I never sold a bunch because my friends were moving a ton. And I didn't want to get in the way of that. In my head, I feel like, man.
Stepping on toes.
Yeah, or just, we lived together. The bills were paid for, all that other stuff. Like, we were still partying, having fun. But it's like, man, I felt like if I jumped in on him, I was going to kind of ruin what he had going on. And I felt like, I was kind of, didn't have to pay for my dope or whatever back then. So it was just cool, And, but it got real fast. It got real fast. He had caught a couple local charges. And he was making enough money that he could hire a good attorney, and eventually the charges would go away. He would keep kicking it down, beat it, but it tipped off the feds, and I didn't realize kind of how big it had gotten. And a couple of my friends got murdered. I had a homeboy that over $1,000. He was messing with some Aryan dudes. He wanted to party with us, and we kind of knew that he wasn't cut to like sell dope. And we're like, Sonny, dude, don't go. Like, just come hang with us and kick it, dude. You're not really wired out for this. And he didn't. So he started messing with some Aryan dudes on the side, getting it from another source, and he got into debt to those dudes for $1,000. And man, they kidnapped him, tortured him for a week, and took him out to Needville and made him dig his own grave and shot him 3 times. Wow. And had a couple other people I know get murdered, and it just got real fast. And it got real dark. And I remember had a falling out with my buddy. He moved out of the apartment. I was getting evicted on the apartment at the apartment, but they hadn't kicked me out. I really laid on my floor one day, and everybody was gone. I just laid on the floor for like a week, and I really just kind of hoped I would die, you know. And I remember got a knock on my door, and it was my uncle. And my uncle, he was a Bel Air police officer, and the family had got worried about me. They hadn't heard about me, and my mom and I weren't talking because she had seen me go down this path of the streets, you know. She was still mad at me for getting kicked out of college. I wasn't really talking with my stepdad. But my uncle came and checked on me, and he got me out of the apartment. I went and stayed with my grandma for a little while. She had a camper in her backyard. And man, that man was always like my guardian angel. You know, he wasn't even blood. He was my stepdad's brother-in-law. But man, he always looked out for me. So he pulled me out of that apartment, took me over to my Nana's house. That was my stepdad's grandma, the one I was telling you about. And she had a camper in her backyard, and her husband was alcoholic. You know, he was a World War II hero, was a good business person, but he always had a drinking problem. And then he had lost his oldest son to brain cancer, and he kind of went off the deep end after that. And so she had this camper because whenever he would have periods of sobriety, and whenever he would fall off the wagon, my uncle would take that camper up to a campground and said, man, you got to stay in the camper till you decide to dry out, you know. And she didn't believe in divorce. You know, she followed the Lord, and she stuck by him through thick and thin. But my grandpa ended up passing away from the alcoholism, but she still had this camper in this backyard. And so my grandma let me stay in the camper for a little while. And so I stayed in that camper, same one my alcoholic grandfather would stay in when he would try to clean up. And so I stayed in there, and I cleaned up for a little bit, but I wasn't ready yet. And so her and I started butting heads. I ended up leaving, made up with my boy, moved back in the apartment with him, and back at it, running and gunning. You know, this is about 1.5 years into it. So 1.5 years, 2 years in, you know, he was, you know, selling more work than ever. The network had got way bigger, and he went out of town. And I walked into a party one night, and this kid that was kind of handling some of his business was at the party, and he was like a dumb young kid. And he walked in, he had a 1/4 pound of ice and $8,000, and it was all my homeboys. And I was like, dude, like, you are going to get killed. Like, these dudes are going to rob you. Like, you walking around showing this stuff off. Like, he didn't get it, you know? Like, you have a big target on your back. So I tried to save him, and I, like, snatched the stuff from him, and I threw it. I was like, man, I'm taking this stuff, and I'm going to go lock it up till Corey gets back in town. And so I snatched the dope, snatched the money, threw the dope in my trunk, threw the money under my seat, and I left the party thinking I'm saving this, you know, kid from really kind of getting jumped and robbed, you know? And I had a homeboy with me, another young guy, and I'm leaving, and I get pulled over by the cops. And you know, I didn't go to the party with the intentions of having dope on me, and not that much either, you know. And because I had been around law enforcement a lot, I never got nervous around police officers. I was always polite. One thing my stepdad always taught me was like, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like,
respect takes you a long way.
It does. And so I never got intimidated in those situations. But I had missed a court date. I had a warrant out, you know. My tags were expired. My license was expired. I didn't have insurance. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to the penitentiary is what I'm thinking. And the police officer comes up, and he was like, starts grilling me like, hey, you been smoking weed? I was like, no, sir, I don't smoke weed. And he's trying to get me to, like, cop to something so he can search the car. And I'm like, no, sir. I said, I'm just taking my buddy home. We just leaving a birthday party. And he goes, he has to see my license. And all I knew was to be honest with the cop. about my license, about the tags. And I go, here's my license, sir, but it's expired, you know, and my insurance has lapsed and my tags are expired. And I just came clean about all that, but I didn't say nothing about the dope or the money. And he goes, do you have any warrants out? And I said, and I just was honest. I said, yes, sir, I think I do. I missed a court date, you know. So he walks back to the car, doesn't run my license so the warrants don't pop up. And he wrote me 6 tickets and he let me go. And I was, I said, jeez, I took my buddy home, got the dope out of my car, and this was right around Christmas time. It was a couple of days later. I was at my family's house for Christmas, and and my uncle, who was the police officer, you know, he was working nights, so he was always super tired, and we were all gathered in the living room, and he's like falling asleep in the recliner. You know, he's a big, heavy guy. And my family was grilling me like, hey, what are you going to do with your life? You know, they knew I'd been out there on the streets. I'd put a little weight back on because once I lost all that weight the first time, I learned how to, like, keep it on and still get high and all that stuff, you know. You know, you try not to be found out. Yeah, trying to hide it. And so I just had this incident with the cops like 2 nights before, and I didn't really mean it, but I said it. I said, you know what? I might go to the military or something. And my uncle was in a dead sleep. He goes, what'd you say? He like woke up. And I said, yeah, I might go to the Air Force or something. And I was really just saying it to get the family off the back, you know? And he goes, all right, I'll be at your apartment tomorrow. And so he showed up the next day at the apartment. And for 6 months, he took me to everything that I had to go to go to the Air Force. I moved back in with my grandmother. I was scared. I didn't want to, you know, because I knew I almost went to prison for a long time. I was still drinking a little bit, but I cut off the drugs at that point, and I started making a plan. I went to my court dates. I ended up getting all 6 tickets dismissed, sold my car. He took me to the recruiters for 6 months. He wasn't working, by the way. He wasn't working at the time, and he took me to everything I needed to go to. And then I went to the Air Force August 6, 2002. And that'll be significant later on, but I went to basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, and then I went to Wichita Falls Shepherd Air Force Base for my tech school. I was going to learn to load bombs on jets, right? And so I'm at Shepherd Air Force Base, and I had been in the military about 6 months, and Corey, my friend that was a big-time dealer, I get an email from his girlfriend, and she emails me, and she goes, the worst thing that could have happened. I need you to call me. So I'm thinking, like, man, they killed Corey is what I was thinking. And so I called her, and she was like, dude, like, DEA kicked in everybody's door. And it turned out, like, DEA had been investigating for, like, 3 years, and they had a thing called Operation Enlightenment, and they kicked in 23 of my people's doors in one day. And between the 23 houses, between Brenham, Austin, Houston, all over, they found $3 million in a ton of dope. And everybody I had been running with for the past 2 years was going to the federal penitentiary. And I was in the military. And I didn't realize that was God. You know, I still didn't realize that was God. And I just I was like, man, like, I can't believe I got away, you know, like, from that. And not that I was moving the weight they were, but that was my whole network, my whole circle, everybody I was running with. I mean, I lived at one of the houses, you know, like, I will say one thing, like 80% of those dudes, it was called Operation Enlightenment, 80% of those dudes today are, like, serving the Lord now. Awesome. You know, so God even had his hand on them, you know what I mean? Corey, my best friend, man, he was in the Lord long before I was. Yeah. And he works, he's a spiritual director at a recovery house in awesome. In Angleton, and man, I love that dude. He is a Jesus freak, man. Come on. And anyway, so I go and I finish learning my job. I get stationed in Germany, and my mom and I started having a real good relationship. She was glad I was out of the streets, you know, and so God brought some healing with that, with me and her. But 3 days after I get stationed in Germany, my mom lets me know. She's like, Ryan, I've got cancer, and she had a cancer called, it was a bone marrow cancer called multiple myeloma. And she let me know 3 days after I got stationed in Germany, and she had known the diagnosis for a long time. But she loved me so much that she didn't tell me until I was thousands of miles away. Yeah. So
she probably thought you wouldn't make it.
She thought I would go back to the streets for sure. Absolutely. And I didn't know how to deal with that, and I didn't know how to deal with that. The only thing I knew was drinking, using drugs, chasing skirt, And so I hit the bottle pretty hard. That February is when February 03 is when I got to Germany, but only for a couple of months, because then I got deployed to Afghanistan, June of 03. And I was in Afghanistan 7 months, and it was the most peaceful time I ever had up until the past 12 years, because you couldn't drink there. And that's 7 months of sobriety, and that was the first time that had ever really happened since I'd started using. And so got in good shape, was in Afghanistan, saving my money, doing well, got back to Germany, and they had 11 days off before you had to go back to work. And we all had a pocket full of money. And I don't know about you, but like, you could put me on any planet, any country, I don't care. I'm going to know who's holding every time, And we would go out drinking at the club, and I see this Turkish dude sitting over in the corner, and I'm like, yep, that dude's holding. I went up and talked to him, and I was like, man, you got some ecstasy or whatever? And he was like, yeah. And I said, how much is it? And he goes, €3. And €3 was like $4 back then. I said, how many do I have to buy to get him for €3? And he's like, just one. And I was like, shoot, you better give me 100 of them. And that's in
Germany? Yeah,
that was in Germany. I didn't know that 80% of the world's ecstasy was made in Germany back then. Germany and meth were both like Nazi inventions. Yeah. The Nazis invented that stuff. And so all that speed stuff is coming out of Germany. And I got them for super cheap. And I just started giving them to all my friends. And it's kind of how I dealt with my mom being sick, And that was it. That was from November till about August that I just hit it hard and was partying all the time and did get caught, but my mom ended up dying that August. And I was with my mom when she passed away. The Air Force flew me back over there. I got a call. I had been home for a month taking care of her, and I went back to Germany, and 3 days later I had to go back. I mean, she was 89 pounds when she passed away. That cancer just beat the tar out of her. And it was pretty sad. But about a month after she died, I got pulled into OSI's office. That's the Office of Special Investigations in the Air Force. And they asked me, what do you know about cocaine and ecstasy on this base? And I was like, man, I don't know nothing, And they tried to grill me for a little while. And I just wasn't going to play. And I had stopped taking drugs after my mom passed. But they were like, well, you take a drug test, and can we search your room? And I said, yeah. And I knew I would pass both, but they kept grilling me. I was like, look, if y'all are just going to keep grilling me, like, let me talk to a lawyer or whatever, Yeah, and so, the crew I'd been running with was, there had been a confidential informant with them, and overheard one of our conversations. And so that's how they found out. And so they pulled two of my friends in, and two of my friends kind of ratted me out. And I ended up, getting sentenced, kicked out of the Air Force for distribution and use of cocaine and ecstasy. And, I did 9 months in a military prison in Germany.
What was that like?
It was pretty cush, dude. I can't really make it. It was all military members. I'll tell you one thing, there's a lot more sex offenders in the military than you think there are, because most of the people in there were drugs, assaults, like fights, or there was quite a few people that had been messing with kids. Oh. It was kind of surprising to me, but it really wasn't that bad. And I think
this was your first time doing any time?
No, I've been in Harris County Jail a bunch of times, just picked up for sitting out traffic tickets, warrants, whatever. I'd been in there. I'd been Fort Bend County Jail once. I got arrested once for selling alcohol to a minor when I was younger. And so that county time was harder than,
The 9 months.
Yeah, than 9 months there. But I didn't tell any of my family about it. I wasn't talking to my real father. I didn't tell my stepdad what was up. I felt really of an oversaw sense of shame. And so I had been put under investigation for a year, Didn't tell any of my family members. And I didn't want to disappoint them because, my mom had just passed and all that other stuff. And, they wanted me out of the streets so bad. And I got a message one day from one of the guards, like, you need to call your dad. So I called my stepdad, and my stepdad was like, Ryan, I thought we were done with this. He goes, what's going on? And I told him, and he was like, and I was really worried about what he would say. And he was like, man, just keep your head down, and when you get out, just come on home, and that meant the world to me. I knew my stepdad always had my back, man. My stepdad, he raised me when he didn't have to. He was a young dude. He raised somebody else's kid. And even though my mom and him had a couple of kids, man, he always treated me like his own son, as much hell as I'd put him through. That was really good to hear him say that. So I got out of the Air Force, out of prison, August 2005, and I moved back to Houston. And did well for a little while. Went to college, worked nights, worked at the grocery store overnight. Got my degree in like 2.5 years. I say I was sober, but I wasn't. I was eating people's Adderalls so I could stay up late, but I wasn't drinking and I wasn't using anything else. So that was one of the reasons why I got my degree so fast. Is I was hopped up on Adderall the whole time, and ended up working too much. Had a marriage, got hooked on painkillers real bad, lost the marriage because of it, and was starting over again. And the painkillers ate my lunch. The painkillers ate my lunch more than meth ever did. I would max out credit cards. I'd go to the pill mills, and I was really on them for like 2 years.
Yeah. And back then, it was a lot easier to get prescriptions. You could go
I could go to the Crooked Doc like at 6 in the morning, pay $80, and he'd write me a script. They call it like the H-Town cocktail or whatever.
The 90-90-90.
Yeah.
Xanax and
the Lorcets and, and so, and I never really liked the Xanax a whole lot, so I would trade them for more Lorcets, and I was eating those like 8 at a time, 25 of them a day. Man. And I was literally full of crap because you wouldn't poop for a week, and
it comes out like a brick.
Yeah, dude, it was terrible. Like, they ate my lunch, man. At least with meth, like, my people were always in it, so I never had to pay a lot for it, Yeah. And I moved in with my best friend Bobby, the one I was telling you about earlier. And man, to get off the pills, like, I got back on the meth really bad. It was the only way I could kick the pills. And some of my friends had started getting out of prison, and I had a homeboy that was still selling it. And so him and I were kicking it after he had got out of prison. He went on some aggravated robbery charges. And he's who I was getting it from then. And I'll tell you what, this time the sexual morality came on strong. Like, I would have a girl leaving and another one coming over, and it just got crazy. And I was living with my best friend, and I ended up getting in a relationship with a girl that I worked with. I worked for a pediatric home health care company in their business office, and she was a doctor of physical therapy. And, you ever read in Proverbs where it talks about, like, the wayward woman came up and, like, grabbed him by the face and was like, man, my husband's gone, this and that and the other. This is how this was with this girl. Like, she came up and was just, like, right in my face and was like, let's go, And, man, we got into a relationship crazy. Like, we'd call other people over. Like, it was nuts. Like, She had her doctorate, but she was smoking glass with me all the time. She had 3 kids. I always wanted to be a dad, but her husband had left her, kind of just like it says in the Proverbs chapter 5, 6, and 7, like, my husband's not home. He left her with her 3 kids. And I'm like, man, I can move in with this girl. She's a doctor. She makes bread. She's got kids that I can help raise. I always wanted to be a dad, and I can run the streets during the day, It seemed like the perfect answer for me back then. It was like everything I ever wanted, And she's down to, like, we'll be calling other girls, all this crazy stuff, And it got real dark. And one of the reasons it got dark was my uncle, the one that I had told you about, he got murdered in the line of duty on Christmas Eve 2012. It was in Bel Air. Yeah, in Bel Air. And I told you he was always like my guardian angel. And the reason there's going to be another reason, but the reason, let me tell you this. Remember earlier I told you that I went to the Air Force August 6, 2002, right? And I told you my uncle wasn't working for those 6 months that he took me to everything I needed to go for the Air Force, right? And the reason that he wasn't working is because he was on this task force with this whole group of, it was like a joint task force, multiple agencies and police departments, right? And there was 2 of the guys on the task force that were stealing evidence or doing something crooked, and they got caught, and they threw my uncle's name in it. And my uncle was, I'm telling you, the most stand-up dude I ever met. Man, I've never seen the man curse, and I've never seen him like treat anybody faulty or lie, or like, he walked the book of James. He never like would preach at you, but he was just the most solid dude I ever met in my life, man. He had pulled me out of handcuffs at 4 a.m. one time when I got arrested off of Hillcroft at an after-hours spot, and I woke up on my couch, you know, because I was screaming for him. Like, I'm telling you, this dude was my guardian angel, right? Like, well, anyways, these guys throw him in this, they say he's part of this thing that they're getting in trouble for, and they're just trying to deflect off them. And the police department suspended both those guys while they got put under investigation without pay, right? And they ended up going to prison for what they got in trouble for. But my uncle's boss knew it was bullcrap, you know, that he was a part of it, so that they had to suspend him while they investigated him, but he got paid the whole time. So he was out of work for 6 months. And, you know, I was at my aunt's house one day. My family had all went to Washington, D.C. They had a police memorial for fallen police officers, and I didn't go. I was the only family member that didn't go. I stayed home, and I was taking care of my family's dogs. And I was over at my aunt's house feeding her dog, and my uncle had an office there. And I'm sitting in the office, and I'm just starting to think about my uncle. And this was early 2013. And I felt something like, say, open his desk drawer. And I didn't know it was God then, but I opened up the desk drawer, and I looked down, and on top of on the very top of his drawer, there's court papers. And it was the acquittal papers of the investigation for the grand jury for what he got wrapped up in. And it showed that there was no evidence and that they were dismissing all the charges against him, right? And I looked at it, and at the bottom of the page, it said August 6, 2002. Wow. And the day he got acquitted was the day that I joined the Air Force. And it's like God had him with his whole life on hold for 6 months, not knowing what was going to happen, and you won't convince me otherwise. It was to make sure that I went to the Air Force and that I got out of there and before DEA kicked in all my friends' doors. Yeah. Like, it's just, there's no way that was a coincidence, you know, the exact same date, right? Mm-hmm. And so when my uncle got murdered, I started paying attention to stuff on Netflix. Look, don't do drugs and watch YouTube, and don't do drugs and watch Netflix. Like, this is rule number 1. But I was in a real dark place after he got murdered, and I started watching the stuff that started making me think God didn't exist, you know? And I'm like, man. And darkness was like just coming in, and I could feel it creeping in, and I started to battle with my sanity. I started to hear voices really bad.
And you were using at this time?
Yeah, I was using, a lot of meth, a lot of meth. Mm-hmm. And the girl and I were arguing all the time, and we would fight. And have you ever seen a movie like Fatal Attraction? It was
Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
Yeah. It was like I would leave, and it would be like a magnet was pulling me back to that house, you know? And I started having tougher and tougher bouts with my sanity, hearing voices and things like that. And I had left one night, and I came back, and we started arguing. And when we started arguing, out of nowhere, I heard an audible voice. And the audible voice said, "Get out of this house now." And when I heard that voice, I didn't have a choice. I dropped everything, and I left. And I was in a rental car, and my mind just snapped. And I left in the rental car, and I called my aunt, my uncle's wife, and I just started thinking, like, man, I started thinking some real weird stuff that people were after me, you know. And
the drones following you or anything?
Yeah, and they didn't have no drones like they did now, you know. But I ditched my dope, and I started thinking people were chasing after me. And I ended up calling my best friend Bobby, and I was like, "Bobby, you need to come get me." And he's like, "Where are you at?" And I'm like, "I'm driving to Missouri City." I was on the southwest side of Meyerland. So I'm thinking people are chasing after me, and I get to HEB parking lot, and I ditch my car because I thought the rental car. And Bobby was like, man, I'm not coming to get you, Ryan, you know? And I was like, Ryan, man, whatever, I'm coming over to your house, you know? And so I ditched my car. I threw my license, my phone. I smashed my phone, threw it in the ditch, and I ran like 3 miles, almost barefooted. And I ran to Bobby's house. And I was just looking for help, you know? And I knocked on the door, and it's where I used to live before I moved in with this girl. And he didn't answer, right? He didn't answer. And he had this old, he had a Mustang, but he had an old pickup truck that he always had there, and I knew it was unlocked. And so I was like, man, let me wait in this pickup truck until he gets home. And I knew it was always unlocked. So I'm sitting in the truck, and I'm kind of having this freak out in my head. And I have this overwhelming sensation to like start the truck, but there's no key there. And so I just turned where the key goes, and the truck started. Mm. And in my head, it was like, I'm supposed to take it. I don't know why, but I just felt like I was supposed to take it. And I ended up stealing my best friend's truck. And I drove it all the way, tried to go to my grandma's house to get help. I ended up going to my dealer's house. And I had some real weird stuff going on in my head, and I wanted to get a gun from him. Because in my head, I thought the girl that I was living with, I thought her kids were in danger. And I was going to go rescue them. This is how backwards my mind was, right? And my dealer at the time, he was like, Ryan, like, you stole Bobby's truck. He knew Bobby. He knew all this. He goes, and Bobby's straight edge. You don't mess around with nothing, you know? And he goes, they're going to call the police on you. You're going to get arrested. And I'm like, no, they won't. I'll call Bobby right now and let him know where his truck is, right? So I called him. Bobby came and got his truck. We were over off like 610 and Ella. They were highly ticked off at me. And I'm talking to my boy JD, and I'm like, JD, I need a gun. These kids are in danger. And he's like, Ryan, you're tripping. Ryan, you're tripping. He goes, he gave me a quarter Xanax. He goes, here, you need to take this quarter Xanax and go in the spare bedroom and lay down and go to sleep, you know. And when your dealer's telling you to go to sleep, like, you probably need to go to sleep, you know. And I'm like, F you, you're not going to help me. You're not going to give me this. I'm going to leave. And I left. And I'm still thinking I'm going to go rescue these kids for whatever reason. And so I left 610 and Ella. I start walking all that morning. It's about 6 a.m. And I'm walking all through Houston, past St. Thomas University, all the way down. And I end up walking down Holcomb. And I call my uncle. I call his son, my cousin Danny. And I'm like, Danny, my feet hurt. I said, my feet hurt. I'm tired of running. I was like, Danny, come get me. And he's like, okay, where are you at? And I told him. And I said, I'm going to keep walking down to Holcomb, or down to, Greenbrier to Holcomb. And like, meet me over there. And he said, okay. And I said, I'll call you at the next gas station. So I didn't have a cell phone. So I kept walking in the next gas station. And I said, I called him again. I said, Danny, where are you? My feet hurt. And he's like, Ryan, I'm not coming to get you. He goes, I'm not coming to get you. And he goes, you need to go check yourself into Bentob, Ryan, like the mental hospital or whatever. And I said, man, I'm going to walk to my stepdad's bank, because my stepdad's been a banker in Bel Air for a lot of years. And so I said, F it. So I walk down Holcomb, and I cross under 610, and Holcomb turns into Bel Air Boulevard, right? So as soon as I cross Bel Air Boulevard, it's like, y'all are going to think I'm tripping. And there's like, the story kind of gets weird, is a motorcycle cop is leading a limousine, and they pull right in front of me and park right in front of me, in front of this office building right there at the intersection of Bel Air and 610. And it's like one motorcycle cop and a limo. And the motorcycle cop opens the back door of the limo, and this man gets out of the limo, and he's like a handsome dude, blonde haired, wearing a suit with like a trench coat, like a wool coat, and it's just September 30th, 2013, and it's hot outside. And he looks at me and he goes, how are you doing today? And I didn't make eye contact with him. I put my head down and I said, I'm doing all right. And I walk right past him. And you'll understand later, but you will not convince me otherwise that was the devil. Like, you won't, like, I believe it was to this day. Yeah. Like, and I started getting chills. Yeah, dude, I believe it was, And I walked all the way to my stepdad's bank, and it had been closed. It closed down. He was waiting for me. My cousin told him I was coming, I guess, and he's got his buddy in there, and I'm just starting to talk like crazy. I'm like, man, Randy, I go, there's so much evil in this world. It's so dark. It's so dark. There's so much evil. And he goes, he goes like saying something about the girl I was living with and this and that and the other. And I said, man, no, I said, she ain't gonna do nothing. Like she was wilding out. And I just said, man, I need to get to my sister's house. And I had a sister from my dad's first marriage, my real dad's first marriage, that was always real close with God. Like she worked at an orphanage, her family, like I didn't know it, but I was like, call Sheila. She'll let me come stay with her. And I really understood now that I was trying to get close to God, but I was running from him at the same time, And he goes, I don't know how to get a hold of her, Ryan. He goes, but what I will do is, he goes, I'll put you in a hotel for one night. He goes, you cannot come home with me. And he goes, I'll get on Facebook and I'll find Sheila and I'll see if she wants to help you at all, And so I said, okay, Randy. And I'm just like, start talking about how evil the world is and it's dark, right? And so he takes me over to the Motel 6 by Energy Park, like Buffalo Speedway and 610 South, right? And right when we pull up into the Motel 6, my mind had been noticing weird things the whole time I'm skitzing out, right? And right when we pull up, there's this beat up old blue truck, and it's got a logo on the side, and it says OCS, we get them home safe. And I noticed it, and there's a handyman that gets out of the truck and walks towards the hotel. And I'm like, man, that's weird. Like, why is that handyman walking out towards the hotel, And my stepdad was like, hey, let me go to the front office and check you in. I don't want him to see you in the condition you're in. He goes, all right. I said, okay, Randy. So I sat in the Suburban, and then I see the handyman come back into the truck and pull off and leave. And then a few minutes later, my stepdad comes, and he was like, here you go, Ryan. Here's the key to the room. It's room 222. And I said, Randy, my feet hurt. My feet hurt. I'm tired of running. My feet hurt. And he goes, well, Ryan, and he starts talking to me real slow and deliberate. He goes, what you need to do is when you go in the room, you need to take off your shoes. You need to go to the sink and run some hot water in the sink and get up on the counter and soak your feet. He's after you do that, you need to go take a long hot shower. And you need to try to lay down and rest for a little bit. Real slow and deliberate. And I said, okay, Randy. And he goes, Ryan, you have to give me your word as a man. And I said, yeah, Randy, what? He goes, that you're not going to tear up this hotel room. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to tear it up. I've never been a destructive person, And so he gives me the key. And I tried to do what my dad said. I went upstairs, went into room 222. I took off my shoes, and I walked to the right, straight ahead. There's a counter with the sink, And I get up, and I go to turn on the sink. As soon as I turned on the sink, the pipes burst from the floor, and it started shooting water all over the hotel room. And I was like, what is going on? And it's like the water is shooting everywhere. And I fall down to my knees, and I look under the counter, and I look up under the sink to see. I was looking to see if a pipe burst or whatever, and there's numbers written under the sink, and there were like 111, 118, 42, 8. And in my head, this is the thought I had. I said, man, those look like scripture. I said, I need to find a Bible. And so I'm in the hotel room, and there's water shooting everywhere, and I start looking for the Bible, because what hotel room doesn't have a Bible, right? And I couldn't find a Bible anywhere. And I just went crazy, and I destroyed the hotel room. I broke the towel. I broke the toilet off the floor like they did in Boondock Saints. I broke the shower. I flipped the beds. I knocked the TV down, and I'm just freaking out. And I have pictures of this my dad took after I ended up getting arrested in a little while. Like, he took pictures later on. He didn't show me till years later. And I'm going to tell you one of those pictures, and maybe we can even throw it up. The counter's there. And the Bible is right there, open on the counter. Wow. It's like just right there on the dresser. The Bible's there, open, and I never even saw it the whole time.
That's crazy.
And so I freak out, and I'm like, dude, I'm about to get in so much trouble. I gotta leave, right? So I walk out the front of the hotel, and I circle around back, and I ended up breaking one other window. And then I'm walking through the parking lot, and right then I see a man come walking at me, and he's all in white. And he's all in white, and he's got a bandage over his face. And my uncle, remember I told you I felt like he's my guardian angel? Well, like, my uncle was a very heavy man, right? And this man looked as though like he could be my uncle, but he was like in a healthy body, right? I didn't really put all this together till later on, but I walked towards him, and he asked me the same question that man in the limo did. He goes, "How are you doing today?" And I had to know where I just said, "I don't know, but I'm going to be okay." And that's all I said. And I just walked past him, and I just believe it was my uncle. My uncle got shot in the face. There's like I'll tell you something a little bit later, but like, I walked past him, and I walked, and anybody could tell I was skitzing out. And I walked to ask some other guy for help. I don't know why I didn't ask him for help, but I asked some other guy for help, and the other guy was like, "Get away from me." And I turned around, and right there was a gold 2001 Honda Accord. And the only reason that I know that is because I used to have the same make and model and color of car. And all I could tell you was that it felt safe, right? So I opened the door and unlocked, and I got in the car. And I'm sitting in there freaking out, not knowing what to do. Like, what do I do? What do I do? The car won't start. A man walks up, and he's like, "Is this your car?" And I was like, "No." And then the next thing I know, cops show up, right? Cops show up, and the first thing I notice about these cops is their badges. And I look at their badges, and like, if you ever seen HPD badge, they're like a silver badge, and they say HPD, and they got the big numbers on them. They're kind of square looking. Well, these badges weren't like that. They were like gold shields. And the first thought I had was like, man, those aren't HPD badges. Like, who are these dudes, you know? And so they opened the car door, and I saw them badges. I didn't think they were legit. So like, I charged them, and they tased me. As soon as they tased me, they took me to the ground, and all these voices were coming out of me. Like, I was just screaming. It was like voices that weren't of my own. Like, "You always screw things up, this and that and the other," right? And they're on top of me after they had tased me, and they handcuffed me. They put me up against the car like this, and I had some glasses on. They took the glasses off my face, and they put sunglasses on my face. And right then, they pulled my shirt. I had a white T-shirt. They pulled it on over my head. And all I know is right then, it was like somebody dumped a whole bathtub full of water on me. And a hand came out and touched me on my chest. And I went soaking wet from head to toe. And a little hand came on my chest and touched me. And I just felt instant peace. And they rolled me over on my stomach. And they asked me, they go, "Do you know who that was?" And I said, "No, I didn't know. But I know I felt instant peace right then." And so they handcuffed me. They put me in the car. They were taking me in the car, and there was 2 cops in the car, and there was one in the passenger seat, and I'm handcuffed like this, and he's looking back at me, and he's telling me like to break out of my handcuffs is what I'm thinking that he was telling me to. And he's like, "Come on, do it. Like, break out. And so I'm trying to, like, I don't know. I just thought that was weird. And then when they got me out of the car, I tried to run again. And they tackled me. I was in handcuffs. And they stripped me of my clothes. And then they took me into the city jail in my underwear. They put me in a white paper suit. And they transferred me over to Harris County. And when I got over to Harris County, I was in the tank there waiting to start processing. And I was in there with all these guys, and I'm just in this, basically a paper towel, and I'm hearing all these voices of shame, and they're shouting me down, like, and they sounded like people I knew, And I look over in the corner of the holding tank, and there's a guy there, and he's a little white man, and he was eating an apple. And he's looking at me, and he goes, come on, like encouraging me. And I just like, my thought was like, how does this dude get an apple up in here? That's what I was thinking. And he's looking at me like, come on, just do it. Like encouraging me, like same kind of thing the cop in the car was, like, come on. And all I know is I had this overwhelming sensation to fall on my knees right then. And I fell on my knees in this holding tank and just started crying out to God in front of everybody amidst all these voices from whatever little strength I had left. It's like I turned my back on my God. I turned my back on my family. And I just started crying, repenting from everything in my heart, you know? And that's the last thing I remember for 4 days. I slept for like 4 days. They put me on some med unit. I just was me and one other dude. I woke up like 2 times, but I slept for like 4 days. Then they put me in a tank 4 days later. And right when I walked in, this dude covered head to toe in tattoos starts to come up and tell me about Jesus, you know? And I had been asleep for 4 days. I got a nap, man. I'm like, didn't charge me with felonies. They gave me evading on foot and burglary of a motor vehicle, 2 misdemeanors. And I was like, dude, my bond's $2,000. I don't need to hear about your Jesus. Let me go get on this phone and try to make this bond, and I'm going to get out of here, you know? And nobody would take my phone calls. Nobody would come pay the $200 bond for me. The girl wouldn't. My family wouldn't. You know, come to find out, my dealer that had saw me that night, I had owed him about $600 or $700. He ended up taking all my possessions from the girl's house, you know, as payback. So I had lost my sanity, my clothes, all my relationships, right, and all my possessions. And all I had was this dude Sanchez that was trying to tell me about Jesus. And I said, man, I just started listening to him. And I read the little Gideons, Psalms, and Proverbs every day. One day he said something to make me get in the book of Titus. And I couldn't stop reading what the book of Titus was about. 1.5 pages long, 3 chapters, just talks about what a man of God is, you know. And I couldn't stop reading it. And I'd been in there 22 days. And the night before my court date, Sanchez told me, I said, Sanchez, I got court tomorrow. They're probably going to give me time served. And I don't know where I'm going to go. I'm going to be homeless. Nobody will take my phone calls. Sanchez started talking to me like he knew me my whole life. He said, Ryan, the Lord Jesus has always looked out for you. He goes, you've never missed a meal. You've always had a roof over your head. And he opened up to Matthew 6:33. And it says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all things shall be added. He goes, he just wants you to believe this one verse right now, Ryan, that he's got this thing figured out. Even if you don't know what happens tomorrow after your court date, he's got your life figured out. He just wants you to put your faith in this one verse. That's all he's asking you to do, right? And I said, you know what, Sanchez, I'm going to believe it, right? So my next day, court date, they take me from the courthouse underground from the jail underground over to the courthouse. And we're in the pod in the little tank where everybody's going to their courts, and you're meeting with your public defender through the window or whatever, right? And my public defender was like, hey, look, you're going to come up in a few minutes. And like they're offering you 2 years probation and outpatient treatment, which means I was like, bet, dude, I'll do probation and go to AA meetings. That's what they're saying, right? But I did all that before. I didn't know where I was going to go, right? So I agreed to that. So they sat me back down, and I'm in this holding tank, and I look up, and it's kind of racially divided over there. So I'm on this one side, and there's a bunch of black dudes across from me, and there's one guy sitting amongst the black dudes, and he catches my attention, kind of like the white dude did with the apple, you know? And he's dark-skinned, but he's not African-American, and I just kept looking at him. I'm like, man, what's up with this? Something different about this dude, you know? And he had tattoos on his arms, and I was trying to read them, and he started talking. He said some really peculiar things. He goes, I watch a lot of YouTube. And then he started talking about the Middle East, you know? And I just was minding my own business, but I looked up at him. You know, I've been sober like several weeks at this point. I said, hey, I don't mean to be rude, but you look like you could be from there, like the Middle East. And he just started laughing. He thought it was the funniest thing ever. And I just thought it was weird, you know? And so they called me to court. And I stand in front of the judge. I'm in the orange jumpsuit, sitting in there, and I'm just agreeing to whatever we agree to, you know? And right before I start talking to the judge, in the back of the courtroom, I hear, Your Honor, Your Honor, Your Honor. And I look in the back of the courtroom, and my biological father is in the courtroom. And I hated the man. You know, after my mom died, I told him every dirty thing I thought about him. Like, man, you weren't there for me and all this other stuff. I had a lot of hatred in my heart towards him, you know. He was really the object of my hatred. And I'm like, what is this dude doing in this courtroom? And I looked up, and it was just very weird. And he goes, Your Honor. He goes, I'm Ryan's father, and I haven't been in his life, but I heard he was in some trouble, and I think I could be of some help. Do you mind if I come forward? And the judge says, you know, it's always good to have dads involved in their kids' lives. So here's this man I hated coming to stand next to me right in the middle of the courtroom, like, what is going on? And my dad says, Your Honor, he goes, I think I know how to help my son. He goes, see, there's this place in Brookshire, Texas. It's called the Manna House. It's run by members of the Titus community. And soon as he said Titus, it was like God flipped a light switch on in my heart, because I had just been in the book of Titus for 3 days straight. And I just started weeping in the courtroom. And I knew that that wasn't a coincidence. And I knew that whatever Sanchez was telling me was the truth. And I knew that I was going to have a place to go and not be homeless, right? And I didn't know what it was, though. And my dad looks at me. I'm just bawling in the courtroom. And my dad goes, do you know somebody associated with them? And I said, I don't have a clue. But I just knew what Sanchez was telling me was the truth, you know. And the judge said something real key. He goes, you know, you don't have any drug charges. He goes, but if you want to go of your own free will, he goes, I'll allow it. And I said, you know, because free will is an important thing. We got to make a decision for the Lord, you know. And I said, in a second, I'll go. In a second. And so my dad says, you know what, I'll be here when you get out, and I'll take you there. And I said, okay. He goes, it'll be a couple hours before you get released. And they take me back to, I signed the papers. They take me back to that holding tank under the courthouse. And I'm sitting there, and I got that New Testament, Psalms and Proverbs, and I got it open to the book of Titus, and I'm reading it again, and I'm trying to process, like, what just happened in this courtroom? And I got tears in my eyes, and I'm like kind of laughing but kind of crying all at the same time. And that man that is, you know, was talking about the Middle East was sitting across from me, and I look up, and he looks at the Bible in my hands, and he looks at me, and he says, that's a really good book. And I look around, and there's just him, and there's a Hispanic dude on either side of him, but there's nobody else in this tank. And I just look at him, and I said, man, it sure is. It sure is. And I asked a really weird question. I said, what is it that you do? And he looks at me, and he goes, well, what we do, he goes, what I do is I go find the ones that are lost and make sure they get home safe. And that's the same thing that was on that truck in the hotel parking lot. You know, we get them home safe. And I didn't know the Bible like I do now. But Matthew 18:12 says, what do you think? Which one of you has 100 sheep and loses one, won't leave the 99 to find the one lost sheep? And I'm like, man, who is this dude in front of me? This is the thought I have. And if you know the Bible, when the Lord showed up right before he was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he had two angels with him when he met Abraham, you know. When the Lord showed up at the road to Emmaus, he had two dudes with him. You know what I mean? And it was like the Ark of the Covenant. They got two angels on either side. And like right when on the story in Luke 24 on the road to Emmaus, right when they broke bread and they opened their eyes and realized it was Jesus. And I was like, who is this dude in front of me? And it's like right then when I had this thought, I'm like, no way this is happening. The guard comes and opens the door and tells him to come with me. And so he says like this, and he stood up slow motion, and his arms were like this. And I told you he had tattoos, and I've been trying to see him. What it said, and it said like slow motion, it said, save all, bar none. And he walked out in front of me. And you won't convince me otherwise that it wasn't the Lord Jesus, you know. And man, I get back to, I was like, what is going on? This stuff is crazy. And I get back. They take me over to the tank. I tell Sanchez about it. And Sanchez is like, man, like you shouldn't be saying that to everybody. They go think you're nuts. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it had been 7 or 8 hours. They hadn't called me ATW yet. And I'm like, man, why am I not out of here, right? And it's like 7 o'clock at night by that time. And right then I hear, church call, church call. And I had this thought, like, man, I ain't been to church in here. Maybe God is telling me to go to church before he lets me out, right? So they take me to the tank where they, this room where they have about 30 dudes, and they had this big old swole white dude preaching, and he started talking about the sin nature in our spirit, man. And he was going in, he was preaching hard, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm just sitting there, and he goes, we're doing this thing with meth addicts now. He goes, it's called divine intervention. And he got like nose to nose with me. And I just started bawling again. I said, all right, God. And they ended up calling me ATW. And I stayed one night at my dad's house. I had an encounter in his spare bedroom with the presence of the Lord. It was I felt love like I never felt before, and I felt holiness like I never felt before. It scared me. I almost ran away again. And it was like that. I knew God loved me, and it felt better than any drug I ever felt. But I also knew that he could crush me if he wanted to, and he wasn't to be played with. That I felt his holiness like Isaiah did in Isaiah 6, Yeah. And they took me the next morning to Manna House. And as soon as I put my feet on the ground in Manna House, man, in my inner man, I stopped running from God, And I spent 8 months there. And God cleaned me up. He helped me forgive my dad, make peace about my mom's death, my uncle's murder. Showed me things about my life, about the girl that was messing with me when I was a kid, how that door got opened. And he just took me on a healing process. And from there, he started dealing with me that he had called me. And I said, okay, what does that look like? Do I go to seminary? That's what I thought. Yeah. And I opened up the Bible to Jeremiah 29. It said, pray for the city where I sent you into exile, for in its welfare you'll find your welfare. And I said, well, I'm in exile in Brookshire, Texas. I guess I'm staying here. Yeah. And a week later, I met a guy named Trey Nine and found out there had been 2 suicides in the community, in the school, 18 overdoses, in a 90% fatherless community, or a very fatherless community. It's debatable on the percentage. Yeah. I was fatherless, and they were using Christian hip-hop to reach the kids, and I loved hip-hop. And I started rocking with Trey, and a couple...
You had never been to Brookshire before?
Never heard of it before. Never heard of it before.
That's awesome.
Found out about Hip Hop Hope, and I started showing up and serving every Thursday. And a couple weeks into it, Trey Nine goes, Ryan, we've been praying for God to send a missionary to live in this little house here in the community while we get Hip Hop Hope started in other inner city communities around Houston. And he goes, I think you're him. And I said, I do too. I said, I think I am too. And so 8 months sober, everybody said we were crazy. I moved into that house and, started rocking with Trey. And from there, it's just I've been on for Jesus ever since, man.
That's just awesome. And it, just to go back what you were saying about Trey, actually believing in you. There's maybe some people, like how you said, might say, oh, well, he's not ready yet.
Yeah.
He's not capable. Or he hasn't shown himself, which is important, but, God's call of your life was undeniable, and it was confirmed through that, that you have never been there. And it's just, it's amazing, man. It's just an amazing story. So your journey during that 8 months, God kind of changing you and getting your mind clear. Was there some clairvoyance moments where you had epiphanies, and I'm sure there was many of them, but kind of understanding how you were almost at a point where you didn't believe in God, and just kind of having them epiphanies along the way, how the enemy had you wrapped up. Is there anything like you can share where you just had moments where God is just revealing and giving you revelation of things that...
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to say this crazy encounter that I had with Jesus that delivered me from this stuff, he took it away in a second. I couldn't kick it. And I don't ever want to represent like I'm special or anything because of that. In fact, to me, it's the opposite. Yeah. I look at myself that I was so hard-headed and so resistant to what God has been trying to do in my life that God had to do all this stuff to get my attention. And it just shows you that he will go to any lengths to save his people, right? Yeah. And, In fact, there was a dude, in the Bible that was Doubting Thomas, that he said, man, unless I stick my fingers in his side and put my hands in his wounds, I'm not going to believe. Yeah. And I feel like that was me, and he said, Thomas, you believe because you've seen, but blessed are those that have believed and not seen. So I do want to, you don't have to have an encounter like that. In fact, I have more respect for a dude like Trey Nine, who just heard the gospel at 17, got convicted of his sin, has been on fire ever since for the Lord. You know what I mean? So God is going to do whatever it takes to save you and save me. Like he's going to do it. Yeah. So don't ever think that's something special. But as I began my walk with the Lord, it was like he took me on a journey back to my life. Mm-hmm. He took me back as I got in his word every day. First thing he did was begin to settle my mind. The more I read the scriptures, the more the voices subsided. The more the roller coaster subsided. I fell in love with his word, and he really healed my mind. No meds or nothing, and it had been a battle and a journey. But then he began to reveal to me, the root causes of why I was making the decisions, right? Mm-hmm. I remember, he told me about the girl that had messed with me. He brought it to my remembrance, and it was through an unusual circumstance. And then, of course, the unforgiveness I had towards my father was huge, right? But I think the one thing that the story I would share the most was I never had peace about my mom dying. I never had peace. And one day I'll just tell you, it was the day while I was at Manna House that it was the day for me to make my peace with God about her passing away, And I was sitting there. They had a thrift store. I was running the thrift store, and a song came on the radio, and it said, it wasn't even I don't even think it was on a like 89.3 or not KSBJ, but it said, don't you worry, child. She had a scout away for you. And I knew it was like God's. And I had been thinking about my mom the moments before that lyric came on. And I knew it was God giving me confirmation that she was with him and that everything was cool. And I made my peace about her death, I used to always, the day she passed away, I would grieve and mourn. The day her birthday, I would grieve and mourn and go to the cemetery. And once I ran into the living God, I don't have a need for all that anymore. Yeah. It's kind of some weird thing, and I don't know that I've ever intentionally been to my mom's grave ever since, unless it was for somebody else's funeral at the same cemetery. Then I'll go there. But man, she ain't there. She with Jesus, and it was just moments after moments. And God, as I walk with God, he would just be able to speak into everyday circumstances. He would bring things to remembrance about my life. And it was just a journey with him to walk out this healing. It was like he had me on the operating table.
Going into the Manna House, and kind of tell us, right now, those that don't know, Ryan is the executive director at the Manna House, where he once was a resident. And now he's kind of leading men, overseeing. Kind of tell us that process, how that came about, and what you're doing in ministry now.
Yeah, so, I rocked with Trey for well over a decade. We've seen God do some amazing things through Eyes on Me. He gave us a vision for a community center in Brookshire, and we've seen him bring that about. That was the Hangar Unity Center, and I led that with that organization. I was the director there for over 7 years. But God always given me a heart that to see the local people in Brookshire raise up and kind of take that movement. And, he had brought me an executive director, Cassandra Runnels, and she began to, was my assistant director for several years. And I prophetically just spoken to her years before, like, hey, get ready. This is going to be yours one day. Not knowing what that meant, but I knew it was from the Lord, And a year and a half ago, January 20th, it was actually my birthday. I get a call from Bob, and Bob Mersman he's 83 years old. He's the executive director of the Manna House. Manna House has been around 28 years. It's a 12-bed house on 3 acres in Brookshire. It was his grandparents' house, and he converted it to help men that suffered from drug and alcohol addiction learn how to live a life the way God intended. And his son was the first graduate of the program, and he always wanted to make sure Manna House carries on to the next generation, but could never find the person to hand it off to. And he tried to hand it off to another guy that got ill. He was an older guy, got ill. And Bob calls me on my birthday, and they had been going through a tough season there. And it didn't look like, it very looked like that Manna House could maybe fold, possibly, if something didn't happen quick. They had been going through some tough stuff. And Bob calls me. Didn't know it was my birthday. And he said, Ron, will you come over to my office? I said, yeah. And it was a Saturday morning. And he goes, look, the guy they hired to take over for him, he goes, I just got his resignation later. He goes, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to retire. I don't know what to do, Ryan. And but I put my hands down in my head, and I heard the Lord say, call Ryan. So he goes, I don't know what that means. I'm just calling you, and asking you to come over. He's like, would you think about maybe there's a way you could help me do this and do the hangar and all this other stuff. And I was like, well, I don't know about all that. My wife was 9 months pregnant with our fourth daughter. And I said, God has always spoke real clear with me, Bob, and so I want to, I volunteer over there. I have since I left. And I was like, of course, I want to do whatever I can to help make sure Manna House continues on to the next generation, but I don't know what that looks like. Let me pray. And I thank God that he's always been real clear with me about stuff. And so I go home and I tell my wife, and my wife is like, heck no. Like, I'm about to have this baby next month. And we are not changing nothing in our life. Like, absolutely not. Like, you're good at the hangar. Everything's good. Like, we're not going to do that. I said, okay, babe, but like, we need to at least pray. We owe it to Bob. And Bob and I had been next door neighbors, for the past 12 years. So I pray, and again, as soon as I close my eyes, this was the next day, but it was the day after my birthday. But the next day, her and I got together and we prayed. And then I went in the room and I prayed by myself, and I heard God real clear. He goes, hey, Ryan. And he goes, remember when you had a birthday when you were a resident at the Manna House? And I said, yeah. And he goes, remember Bob gave you a card? And I said, I do. And he goes, what verse was on the card? That's how God talks to me. And I said, it was Habakkuk chapter 2. It says, even though the vision tarry, wait for it. It'll surely come to pass. Like, write it down, make it plain, so he who can read it can run, And Bob wrote that passage down on my birthday card 10 years earlier. And I remember when Bob gave me that card when I was a resident there, that I thought it meant one day I would be running the Manna House, And the Holy Spirit reminded me, he goes, you remember that card? And I said, I do, God. And I said, okay, God, if this is you.
You got to convince my wife.
Yeah, you got pretty much, you got to convince my wife. And this is what I said, I need to find that card, is what I said, right?
Double confirmation.
Yep, I need to find that card. And I get up in the closet. I have one shoebox of stuff of paperwork when I was a resident at the Manna House. And I pull it down and I look at it. And I found another card or something, and it's not in there. And so I'm like, all right, maybe it's just something I ate. Maybe I didn't hear God. So I walk out in the living room, and here comes my wife walking out of the laundry room. And she got the card in her hand. And I said, I just started weeping. And I said, I looked at her. The scripture was there. And I said, all right. And she's like, okay, let's do it, And, of course, she would be the one that have to find it, because that's the only way she was getting on board with it. You know what I mean? And, I had that baby March 6th. She had that baby. I didn't have nothing. She had that baby March 6th, and I started over there April 1st, And it's been, I told Bob all the time, he's 83. He's in great health. He's stronger. He could probably whoop all of us. A big old farm boy, but he sold his farm in Sealy to make sure that place kept running. He spent his retirement on that place to make sure that thing kept running. And I was like, he gave all that land to the ministry, which he could sold that land for several $1 million now, and it's just like, I guess I got to make sure that this thing stays on past him. And so we've put in a place that we're putting in processes in a place that not only will Manna House continue to the next generation, we've given it a facelift. We're giving it a renovation. We have a plan to grow it to triple its size, but we're putting in the processes and plans and the everything in place to make sure that it reproduces every generation until Jesus comes back, man. And so it's been a lot of fun being over there for the past year. A lot of warfare, but it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story, Ryan. I just want you to get the last word. If there's somebody out there that they relate to your story.
Yeah.
And how they could reach you. I know you're doing amazing things at the Manna House, and they don't have to walk this life alone. God has positioned soldiers and people out here that we're really out here. We're helping people that are lost, and there's people that are called, as you were called, to this ministry, and are gifted in areas to help guide people. We can't ultimately save anyone. Only God can. Yeah. But we're the guiders, and just as people in your life guided you towards your recovery and ultimately, the position you're in now. So if anybody out there is listening and kind of finds themselves in a position that you were kind of lost, losing their sanity, at their wits' end, what would you tell that person? I'll let you have the closing words, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing, I think there's 5 different people. If you go look at the 107, Psalm 107, and, it said, let's see, it talks about 5 different people that got caught up in their own transgressions, and they're different things. And this is what you just said, almost what you said. It says they reeled and staggered like drunken men and were at their wits' end, right? That's what you just said. They said wits' end, right? And if you're at your wits' end and you're trying to battle sanity, or you've been trying to battle this own strength, the answer is right there in verse 28. It says, then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. He made the storm be still, and the waves of the sea were hushed. And just like I did, the first thing you need to do is cry out to the Lord with everything inside of you. Like, get on your face and just cry out to the Lord to rescue you, save you, put your feet on solid ground, and establish you. And when you do that, first of all, God will answer. It's a promise. He will answer. He is the supernatural God of the Bible. He will come. It might not look how you think it's going to look, but he will do it. If your heart is to be saved, he will save you, and he will draw you. You don't have to do this alone. We got a whole community of folks, Abel, myself, man, connect with us. Set Free Ministries, Manna House TX is our website. Depending on what side of town you're on, reach out to us, man. We got classes 3 times a day. They're open for the public. Any man that wants to go, that needs help, can come. Send us a message on social media. If you go to our website, there's an interest form for our New Start program. We offer a year-long New Start program. We try to keep it as cheap as possible, but if the heart is right, and we'll figure it out. Yeah. So put on that application. Let us reach out to you. If not, we can help you get pointed in some right directions. There's meetings everywhere, but you need to get in that word, cry out to the Lord. He can do for you what you can't do for yourself. And that's what you got to realize, is that even in your best efforts, you can't beat this thing, but he can in an instant. And he's got a plan and a purpose for you. And it'll be the joy of your life to discover what that is, because he just continues to show me that he's just getting started, and I believe he wants to do that with you.